So today we're going to be working with painting flowers because I love painting flowers. I like how they look and I really enjoy the layering process that it takes to make them. It'll only take about 15 to 20 minutes to paint them, but you can take more time than that. Feel free to pause the video if you need to, because I do know that sometimes it feels like it's going really fast when it's just being talked about and painted as you go. So again, feel free to pause it at any time and I will be right there to resume as soon as you are. Alright you guys, so flowers. I love drawing flowers, and this is going to be a good one because we're going to only use 4 colors, and those 4 colors is green, white, red, and black. Or if you're fancy and you have Payne's Gray, that works too. But we're going to start with some blobs because I generally work with shapes, and those shapes are generally circles or triangles. So we're going to go with kind of circly blobs today. They're not going to be complete circles, so don't worry if you're not doing very circly kind of shapes. They can be blobby and, well, look at what mine are doing. So you want to do a few blobs like this, and then you want to do some side bits, because what you want it to look like is a bouquet, and you want to make sure there's some flowers that are on their side. So I made one look kind of like a leaf and the other one look kind of like a butterfly almost. Just because you're going to see as we go how that affects your bouquet. I've also added some little blotchy parts and dots just so we can get more little flicks of flower in there. I'm also going to go in with some green, and I'm going to start putting in that stems and leaves. So you see here, I'm just drawing a line with the side of my brush down to a point. And I'm doing that with probably about 4 of those flowers, the big ones, and then I'm going to draw out some leaves. I'm going to just do some lines out. They don't have to be all the same way. And then I'm just going to pull down some color to look like they're pointed leaves right there. It's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. But you know what, if you're having a little bit of an issue, that's okay, just work through it. You can always pause, right? And you notice there's a little space between the 2 points. That's to make the leaves actually look like more like leaves before I put any detail in there. So I've added the lines up to the flowers, and now it's time to start adding some lighter bits. So you'll see I've got the red and a little bit of white being mixed in here. You don't want to add too much white because you just want a little bit lighter than what you've got. So play around with that. Don't worry too much if it's too light or not. You can always go and mix some more color in. The other thing that's nice is that your paint on the canvas is still a little bit wet, and what that's going to do is help your colors mix a little on the flower. So you'll see that I kind of started with a flat brush to get a little color in there, and then I start using the side of my brush. And what that's going to do is help me make these nice tiny little lines all around my flower that start the look of petals. And I'm going to do that on all my flowers. Remember too, when you're flicking, be gentle, right? So if you look how gentle I am on the brush, I'm not pushing it down too hard or anything. I'm just sort of flicking and then taking my brush off at the end of the flick there. And it's quick little flicks. It's no long lines or anything. So you want to just kind of flick, 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 flick instead of line, 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 right? And here we go. I'm going back into that to add some flicks outside of the blob, because this is why we wanted to make it spaced out a little bit, right? So you can add those petals coming out and make them look really kind of haywire and random. And so you see on the side petals, I'm flicking out still to the top, but I'm not going around like a circle. I'm following the line of the petal. So you'll see I'll go to the bottom and I'll start flicking in petals downward, but I won't be doing too much there, because you can see it doesn't need a whole lot, right? But you also notice because that flower was fairly wet, it blended in a little bit more, which is great because it does give you an ability to let some shadows in there without even having to do anything. I'm going to add to my little flick there. And again, I'm just following the lines of my shapes, and then I'm flicking outwards. So in this one, you'll see I'm doing the same thing, but I'm going around in a circle again for this one. So my flicks are always out past the lines of my blob, just a little bit. And the side of my brush will follow and go flat and have that tiny little line there, right? So you don't want to use the side of your, or well, not really the side, I guess, but you don't want to use the bigger part of your brush. You just want to use that little thin part. And as you can see, as it follows around there, you've got all these awesome little spiky things coming out of your flower. And that's what you kind of want it to look like, a spiky ball. And already our flowers are starting to look pretty good. And while I'm working, if you want to pause it and catch up, or you want to go back, you're more than able to. I tend to work pretty fast sometimes, so it's a great idea if you feel like pausing and just kind of following along that way, having little pause points here and there. So now I'm going to mix some more white in with that red and kind of just find a lighter color so I can add more flicks that make my flowers look a little more like they've been touched by the sun a little. Got some rays going on. And note too that I'm adding a little less of the color every time I get a new layer or a lighter layer, and that's because I don't want to lose what we've already painted behind completely, right? I want to just make sure that I'm building on top of that color. The point isn't to get rid of what's underneath, it's to work with it, right? And that's why layers are so great, and why they're so important also. So you can see there those little details. I'm adding stuff to the bottom. And it's pretty light. We can always go back in with some darker colors too, which is fine. It's a bit of back and forth when you're painting, right? Sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, or you try something and it's perfect. It's part of the process. So here I am. I'm still using the side of my brush, trying to get those thin little strokes in there. But again, not using too much. And then you just follow the rest of your lines that you used before. It doesn't have to be completely, but just the same direction. So here I'm just going to get some green, and I'm going to mix some of that white in there, because I'm going to start using a little bit a little bit of this same technique to get some of that lighter color in with those petals and those stems. So I'm following the line of the top of the leaf and then the middle of the leaf, because that's kind of where that little vein is every time you see a leaf or something like that, right? And then I'm just going to add some more white where I think it works best, which is generally just across the top of the leaf in certain spots, but not covering the entire dark part of the leaf there. And then I'm just going to go on with the stems, and I'm going to just drag it down little portions of the stems. I don't, like I said, want to cover that dark completely. All I'm trying to do is make it look like there's light hitting it. And so I'm going to leave that dark bit just at the top there, because that's most of the time where those flowers are going to shadow that stem. But I think that's all I'm really going to do with it. And then I'm going to grab some white, and I'm going to grab a little bit of white onto the petals there. I'm not using anything but white here, and it's just a really kind of final detail sort of moment. But you're noticing I'm not using a lot with it, and you'll see I'm going to use my fingers a little bit here because I just want to wipe that white around in certain spots. So you'll see most of my flowers have a little bit of white now. I'm just going to go around and finish that up. So if you see some little white spots you want to do, definitely go ahead with it. Just remember to use very little color on your brush. If you have too much paint, this is going to be really difficult, so you just want to use a little bit of paint and a tiny bit of water to get that in. And even you'll see I'll mess up and I'll just kind of wipe it away with my finger. Also, if you do that, so I don't get in trouble or you don't get in trouble, just make sure you have a napkin so you can wipe off your fingers rather than wiping on your clothes or wiping it on your table or wherever you're at. So this is where I'm going to mix a little bit of my black and my white to create a little bit of a gray. And that gray is going to help me do the center of my flowers. And because the center is so delicate and so small, I'm going to just do a lighter color first and then put very little bits of dark and light in there. But this is the first step here, is just create like a little bit of a center. It doesn't have to be perfectly round. You can even add a little bit of those little flicks in there to make it look sort of like those petals are coming into it. And you only have to do the centers on the flowers that are showing its full face, or spots where you think there might be a little bit of a center. Because when the flower's facing away from you, you don't see that, right? So that's why I only did those two and a little bit of the other one, because I thought maybe a little bit of that center might peek out there. And then I'm going to use just some black here, get a little bit of that shade going in. And if it looks a little too dark or a little too much, you can always mess around with it, let it dry, paint over it, or again wipe it away. Just make sure you have the cleaning stuff you need to wipe it off your fingers rather than clothes. So I'm going to add a little more white to it so I can get some pretty nice white little dots on the top of each flower, so it looks like there's a little bit of light hitting the center as well as those leaves. It'll look kind of weird if you have those centers without any light bits on there, and I just do it in the top corners, maybe in the bottom a bit because that will be more of a rounded space. But you can see it kind of just adds that little bit that you want. We're nearing the end of this flower too, or this flower project. So you guys, if you're at this point, whether you've paused it and kept going or not, you're doing a really good job. I'm going to just go in with some of this red here, and I'm just going to put in a little bit more. It'll look like a little too much because I'm going to go back in after. I just really wanted to add a little more darkness to this flower and to a couple little spots, which you're totally okay to do. If you like your flower as it is though, don't worry about doing this part. This is kind of a correction. So you can see I'm just adding little bits here and there to make sure that I'm getting the points that I want in my flower to look the way they do. The other thing too is my flowers are probably a little more dry at this point, so you're going to see that a little more, which is fine. I'm going to go back in with a little bit lighter again just to make sure that it matches. Maybe just flick some things around here and really kind of drive home what these flowers are supposed to look like. we go, adding a little bit more white and a little bit of red there again to get a little lighter than what I just put down. And like I said, I'm just going to flick in a little bit more. It's like I said, I think a few times before, it's push and pull, right? So you want to make sure you're okay with going back and forth, because there will be back and forth a lot of the time. But yeah, so I'm pretty close to done here. And I think you guys all did a wonderful job. I'm sure you did. And here I am going in with a little darker just to get that in there. I think I messed that one up a little bit, so I'm fixing it. But at the end, this is how they should look. And a great job, you guys. And again, you're more than welcome to go back in the video and try again, or, you know, paint over, do what you want. I love this painting style. I love these flowers. So I'm so glad you guys stuck around to the end to finish it. And remember too, if you see the gray behind the flowers, you don't have to have that color in the background. That's totally fine. But yeah, I'm seeing this little bit of white here. I'm going to add a little bit of extra just because. And again, like I said, if you like how yours is already, keep it that way. I'm kind of finicky. I like to add little things here and there. Sometimes I go over the top, but yeah. Great job, you guys. We are now complete.